This is Beyond the Big Screen podcast with your host, Steve Guerra. Thank you for listening to Beyond the Big Screen podcast, where we talk about great movies and stories so great they should be movies. Find show notes, links to subscribe, and leave Apple Podcast reviews by going to our website, beyondthebigscreen.com. And now, let's go beyond the big screen.
Welcome back to the program. Today we are going undercover to discuss the most famous undercover law enforcement agent of all time, or at least that's what I would claim. And that's Joseph Pistone, better known as Donnie Brasco. Mustache Chris and I will explore the incredible story of an FBI agent who went so deep undercover into the New York Mafia that he almost became a made man. We will discover details about Agent Pistone that are almost beyond belief, and we will see a very different view of the Mafia in New York. We'll also get into some of our thoughts on what type of person could go so deep into assuming a new identity and becoming so close with the people, friends, that he knew eventually would either be arrested or even whacked. It's just an incredible story. So today we're going to dive into Donnie Brasco. Chris, before we get started, Mustache Chris, what do you think about Donnie Brasco? How did your opinion on him change? Because I'm going to honestly say the movie, I probably watched it nothing less than 20 times, but after doing some more research into him, it's so much far more beyond the movie you could ever imagine.
Yeah, the movie does a pretty good job. Like if you watch the movie, you'll come away understanding basically Operation Donnie Brasco. But once you start digging into it more, it's a very complex story, actually. It's in terms of the nature of undercover work and, how much did Joe do and not do. And it's a pretty fascinating subject.
All right, so let's get into the whole idea of Operation Donnie Brasco, and what was this operation supposed to do?
So yeah, Operation Donnie Brasco was a deep undercover operation. They would infiltrate one of the mafia families. Could have been any of them, right? And then this story just happened to be the Bonanno family because that was the one he got in with. But yeah, it's surprising now because we've just gotten so used to the fact that, police organizations and the FBI, CIA, they do undercover work. But J. Edgar Hoover was not a big fan of undercover work. They did undercover work, but long-term undercover work. Yeah, he wasn't a very big fan of it because he just saw it as an opportunity of, corrupting his agents having to be involved in crimes. And legitimately, there is a lot of concerns with that because you can look up stories about undercover cops that have basically turned, where they're selling information to the bad guys, right? Like they'd become one of them. We did a podcast kind of Narc that kind of touched on this from before. Yeah, but the alternative at the time was they used to rely almost completely on informants to get insider information. The problem with informants is a lot of the times you're talking to guys who are scumbags themselves or criminals themselves, and they could be feeding you false information, or they could be, trying to settle a beef or using the FBI to settle some territorial dispute within, whatever town or city that they're in. So you have to take a lot of the information that you get from informants with a grain of salt. Whereas with undercover cops, I think there's less of a concern about that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, is that with the undercover cop, as long as they stay clean, you have a much more reliable person who can go to court and who can make these reports and start making connections between things. When you have a just some criminal who wants to turn evidence against the other people. They have a very perverse incentive to pin everything on the other people and whitewash their own involvement in the crime. I will say, though, I'm certainly no fan of J. Edgar Hoover, but in a lot of ways, he had a point that undercover work can, just on the surface of it, to really do undercover work well, and we can discuss this later on, is that how can the person not be involved, the agent, how can they not be involved in criminal activities if they're always rubbing elbows with criminals and they have to look like legit criminals?
Oh, the reality of the situation, like if you're going to go deep undercover like Joe, you have to, right? You have to participate in some of these crimes. Now, Joe, he said he put a limit on it, like stuff like murder or I don't know, like intense physical assault, or I'm sure he roughed up a couple of people, right? But nothing like super serious. But like in terms of, sending people to the hospital and stuff like that, he was just, I'm not, or pulling a gun out on like, families and jewel robberies. And he was like, oh, I'm not doing that. And this is what he says. And he would find ways of getting out of that. Like, I can't pick that lock. Not every lock's the same. And it's actually got him in trouble at one point where the mobsters were like, well, what kind of jewel thief are you if you can't pick any of these locks? So, but yeah, he's going to have to participate in some of the stuff, because would you trust, like, if you're a mobster and, this guy's hanging around and he's not doing he's not getting his hands dirty in any of this stuff. Like, I wouldn't trust him.
So where does Joe come from? What's his life a little bit before he becomes an FBI agent?
Oh, so he grew up in Paterson, New Jersey, which was like a heavy, like Italian, Sicilian, Calabrian neighborhood. And he grew up a lot around a lot of these mob guys, right? He grew up in a pretty working class environment too. His dad ran various bars, and I believe his mom was a stay-at-home mom. So, like he grew up in the street culture, really. He grew up with knowing the lingo and being the part, right? Like that, to me, his early upbringing is really, I think, really set the stones in place for his mission to be really successful. Because I don't know, I can just speak from personal experience. You can't act the street, right? Like either you grew up on it and you could tell pretty much as soon as you see somebody's face, it's like, yeah, this person's from the streets. They know it, inside and out. It's not something you can really you can act it like in a movie, but like to like other street guys and mobsters, no, they're gonna, they got a detector for this type of stuff, right? And Joe didn't really have to, obviously had to put on performance. He was acting as Donnie Brasco, but he just had to act like himself because it was the truth. He grew up around these guys. He grew up on the same streets as these guys did.
That probably is the toughest thing, is really putting on that garb. And if you, probably the reason that Joe could go so deep is that he did have that intimate knowledge of that culture, which probably gave him a big leg up over other agents trying to bust into that. I mean, if you have somebody who shows up in the mafia circles and they're the square jawed Harvard Law graduate with the black suit and white shirt and black tie, he's not going to fit in with Lefty Ruggiero.
No, I know there's a lot of Mormons in the FBI and like the CIA. It's not like a Mormon, like straight from Colorado to go like infiltrate the Bonanno family. He's gonna he won't even get in. They probably won't kill him. It's just not going to work.
Well, then that really leads us to talking about, how does Joe become Donnie Brasco, and how is he able to squeeze himself into this whole environment?
Yeah, well, okay. So Joe was pretty successful academically, actually. He went to college. From my research, he got like a degree in anthropology, and then but he always wanted to be like a cop or something along those lines. He said he looked up to the cops in the neighborhood. He talks about this where like the cops where he grew up, like actually walked the beat. So you actually got to know these guys, and he looked up to them. He always said he always wanted to be a cop, but he ended up joining the Navy, and he was in some kind of intelligence wing of the Navy. I was making a joke earlier this week saying like he was NCIS before NCIS. That's silly, like it's like a CSI, but on like for the Navy. And he did, I think it was about 3-4 years in that. And then he signed up to join the FBI because he wanted to be an agent.
And then how does he get himself? It's not just easy. It's not like you apply to get a job with the mafia. You've got to kind of work your way into it. How did he work his way into one of these families?
Oh, okay. So, yeah. So they set up. So when he joins the FBI, they looked at his previous record. He actually did some undercover work in Jacksonville, and he had some previous undercover work, right? So the FBI, they came up with this idea that they were going to have an agent like do deep. Well, initially it was only supposed to be 6 months actually, and it just got bigger and bigger. But they had this idea that they were going to have an undercover cop try to infiltrate one of these crime families. Initially, the idea was they wanted to stop a string of truck jackings that had been going around. If you guys had listened to our previous episodes, that was a big mob thing. Was stealing tractor trailers and selling swag out of their shops and what have you. Joe volunteers because he sees an opportunity to make a name for himself, and it's something that he's good at because he had previously done undercover work, and he was perfect for the role. So he comes up with this this character, Donnie Brasco, that's a jewel thief, and he's an orphan. So the reason he picked jewel thief because it's like it's a relatively non-violent crime. He's not going in there and saying like, oh yeah, I'm a hitman or something like that, or I rob banks or I do something like that. He's like a cat burglar. And then he comes up with the orphan line because he's an orphan. So like people aren't going to really look into his background as much as say like, oh, where's your parents? Like, I want to see your parents, type thing. And he also mentions that he grew up in Florida. So he's outside of New York. So he's kind of like he's like a loner in New York. It's pretty brilliant, character that he comes up with. And, he actually goes to like, gem school. Takes like a course in gemology. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah, I would say so. Gemology,
yeah. So he can play the part. He knows like how to spot a fake diamond, which diamonds are valuable, which ones are not valuable. So like when these guys are say going to rob a place, or if they do rob a place, he can truthfully tell them like, hey, this diamond's actually worth this amount, or this diamond is fake, right? So that's to set it all up there.
It really was, if you think about it, a brilliant way, because saying that he's from Florida, it gives him a reason to leave New York, or at least reason to not be at these social clubs hanging out every day. Oh, I gotta go to Florida, and then he can go do FBI business or go gets things set up in other cities, or even just visit with his family. Like, it really was a very well thought out. And I also thought the way he got himself ingrained into the family, he didn't just barrel in. He knew the places where they hung out, and he just slowly started to make a name for himself and get noticed, and then looked for people who he could become associated with. And then I think that was maybe, I wonder if the next step, he really even realized that once he got associated, like he could just keep worming him way deeper and deeper into the organization. I wonder if that was that completely thought out, or it was just like, okay, let's go to the next thing. Let's go to the next thing. Let's go to the next thing.
Yeah, from my reading, it took a couple of months before any of the mob guys really went up and started talking to him, right? And he made it he made a note of like, because he realized a lot of this the mob lifestyle, the job is a 24/7, 7-day-a-week type job. So he would come in at different times of the day, right? So like, one day he'd be coming in at lunch to their social club or their bars that he used to drink, and then he would make sure he came in on a Sunday at like 10 o'clock at night. So they would just see that he was working 7 days a week at all different types of hours, which is, I mean, just attention to detail, right? It's pretty remarkable.
Steve here. We are a member of the Parthenon Podcast Network, featuring great shows like Scott Rank's History Unplugged podcast and other great podcasts. Go to parthenonpodcast.com to learn more. And here is a quick word from our sponsors. Now, you say that he started with the Colombo crew, but that kind of led him to bigger and better things.
Yeah, initially he got involved with the Colombo crew, particularly Gilly Greca crew, and they were particularly famous for carjackings, right? Which initially is what the operation was all about. Was you get in undercover and find out, how this carjacking operation works, like who's paying off who and how's it going down and who can we arrest. But he's only there for a little bit, actually. I think it was only a couple of months. And in the movie Donnie Brasco, if you remember the scene with the they're at the barber shop and he's getting shaved. Yeah. The guy screams at him, "Hey, get over here." That's supposed to be Gilly.
He eventually gets in with another crew with this guy named Anthony Mira. How does he get noticed by Anthony Mira?
Oh, just through like from my understanding, like just like through connections, like with the I think he knew Gilly too, and then he had like a falling out, and then the Colombo family, or not a falling out, he was just having difficulties with them, and like Mira was around, and Mira saw him and took a liking to him.
Tell us, now we're going to start getting into it where we're going to talk about a lot of these personalities. And Anthony Mira is one of the personalities that's he gets in with really quickly or early and then moves on from. Tell us a little bit about Anthony Mira.
Anthony Mira. I mean, according to Joe, Anthony Mira is probably the worst human being he's ever known in his entire life. Just a mean man. He grew up in Knickerbocker Village. Him and Lefty, actually, who we're going to talk about later, were good friends, but then they ended up having a falling out themselves. He basically just grew up around criminals his entire life. Basically, all his friends and family were either in the mob or associated with the mob. And even like Anthony was a weird dude, even just for like mob guys are weird, but for a mobster, he was like especially weird because he was like really reclusive and didn't really talk to like any of the other wise guys, and like, which is just odd behavior for just Italians in general, let alone like mobsters, like you think of like Italians, and it's funny, we were talking about this earlier, but you think of Italians, you think like there's a stereotype, but there's some truth to it, like it's like the kissing and the hugging and like, oh, family's everything. And they loved, talking, and, there's a lot of truth to it. Mira wasn't like this at all. Like, maybe I didn't get into a ton of research about his young childhood, but, maybe I assume he probably had a pretty rough childhood, and this type of behavior is usually typical of it. Yeah, and he made most of his money just doing like the same kind of mafia stuff, extortion, a couple robberies here and there, some drug dealing, loan sharking was his big one. He's actually famous for, at the height of his earning power, it's claimed that he was bringing in $5,000 a day to the Bonanno family, which is incredible. Mira also didn't drink. at all, which is another odd thing for a mob guy. Just didn't drink at all. Just drank ginger ale, no beer, no wine, nothing. He ended up getting him and Joe strike up a pretty good working relationship, right? Joe couldn't stand the guy. There's a pretty famous story of they were at some restaurant or something, and Mira started just berating a waitress, like screaming at her, yelling at her, and talking down to her. And Joe goes like, she's trying her best here, man. Like, just calm down a little bit. And he starts going off on Joe, and Joe's sitting there thinking to himself, he's like, I'm working 7 days a week. I can't see my family, and I got to listen to this guy and, rip into me in a public space. And Joe says, like, when they were away, he basically told Mira, like, you can't talk to me like that in public anymore, right? Because he had to keep up the act, right? I'm sure if Joe was just Joe himself, he probably would have clocked Mira in the face. But, Mira's a made guy, and he's supposed to be trying to get into the mob and trying to understand the rules, so you can't touch them, right? So eventually Mira goes to jail for some drug trafficking charges. He actually fled for a bit, and it took about 4 months before they caught him. He went to jail for 8 years. I don't think he ended up serving the entire 8 years. But then when he goes to jail, Lefty Ruggiero moves in and starts talking to Joe Pistone.
I think you get to see, and especially in this book, because we get to know, and with this, I think you get to see in this story, especially because we get to know these people so much personally through Joe Pistone. You get to see so many different character types. You have this Anthony Mira, who's really just a cold-hearted SOB criminal. But then we're going to meet other criminals who are very different, mafia members who have a very different attitude, very different personalities. I can see why Joe wanted to probably move on from Mira, even though Mira was I think from my gathering, and I wonder if you would, what you would think of this, Mira was a good earner, but he wasn't capo material. He wasn't captain or anything higher in the organization. He was a soldier, and that was pretty much it.
Oh yeah, for sure, right? And then just his personality. I just don't think anybody in charge of any family would really want him moving up because they didn't like him. I mean, even after Joe came out, Mira didn't even bother trying to argue, oh, I was innocent, I was only here for, you know what I mean, right? Because he knew that they were all going to kill him anyways, because he knew that they didn't like him anyway. They didn't like him either, right? I tell for the audience, actually look up a picture of Anthony Mira. He looks like a shark. I don't even know how to describe the face. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
he looks like something out of a Bond movie or something. Yeah. There's, I don't know, it's probably not a popular opinion, but I think you could tell a lot about somebody's personality, but just looking at their facial structure.
I think you get some of their continence. Something comes across in the way they look, but his hair, his face, is the way he dressed. Everything just screamed that he was a predator.
Oh yeah, for sure. Then Mira's also just a little side note. He was, I don't understand how, but I guess because it was the money. He was quite the ladies' man. He would be going out with actresses and models and famous people and good looking girls around the neighborhood, and he never had a problem getting women. But I mean, I'm looking at a picture of the guy, and I'm like, I don't get it, man. He's not an attractive looking dude at all.
Now, the next person that Donnie moves on to is Lefty Ruggiero. And I mean, I know that they're all criminals and everything, but I have to say I have a real soft spot in my heart for Lefty. There's something that I think he would annoy the heck out of me in personal life, but just reading about somebody like this, I don't know. He cracks me up.
Yeah, I think I messaged you earlier. I'm like, I don't know if I could do what Joe did with Lefty, because I would have lost it. We got into some of the reasons why I would have lost it with Lefty, just to the sense you're too much, man. I can't be around you, just listen. I could probably hang out with the guy for a bit, but I couldn't spend even a whole entire day with him.
I mean, doesn't he strike you as a real person though? Like so many of these people you read about and they're just mafiosi or they're this. I mean, he's a real person.
Yeah, that was the impression that I got, right? He seemed like, we read about some of these guys and a lot of them are like, they're like psychopaths, right? I mean, we'll down the road we'll talk about like Casso and like Tommy Karate and like some of these I mean, we took Albert Anastasia's and one. We talked about Roy DeMeo. Like I don't know, man. A lot of people, but like Lefty, yeah, he seems like somebody you would be able to have like a pretty normal conversation with, you know, maybe not want to spend a week with, but like have like a normal conversation about, you know, baseball or whatever. And I mean, Lefty was a mob guy through and through, right? Like he was 24/7 mob all the time, right? He was kind of like the historian of the mob in this story. This is where Donnie got a lot of the information, but just kind of how the families came about and how it all worked, because Lefty was a relatively good teacher about it.
Yeah, he seemed like a person with interests that, like you said, the historian of the mafia. He lived, ate, and breathed the mafia, and yeah, you gotta kind of in a way respect that it was more. It was life for him. It wasn't just a means to making money and girls and cars and stuff like that. He had genuinely, that was his identity.
Yeah, like in a lot of ways that people like identify with their nation. In a lot of ways, like it was like a version of, I guess, mobster nationalism is a way to describe it, right? Where somebody like generally like takes their nationality very seriously or their local identity very seriously, and they learn all about the history, and that's who they are through and through. Allegiance to a church denomination as an example, right?
Or even somebody like I've met people, and I'm sure most people have, somebody who has a really strong allegiance to their job. You know, they love the company they work for, and they are the organization, and they learn everything they can about it, and they really truly enjoy their work. And that's Lefty. I think if Lefty had grown up in a slightly different situation, he probably would have been like that way if he had been in the army, or if he had worked for GM or the electric companies. Some people are just like that, and I think there's it was misplaced, but you've kind of got to respect that quality in Lefty.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I mean, Lefty like kind of brings up a couple of like good points. We'll get into his background in a little bit. Like he brings up a couple of good points though, like in the movie. But this conversation actually did happen when he talks about like the army. Donnie's like, oh yeah, it's like the army, but it's like the army is the guy that tells you to go whack somebody that you don't know. And like that's not what we do. Like if you're gonna whack somebody, it's gonna be somebody that you know. And it's what is this point that he's saying is like when somebody gets whacked in the mob, it's not like just something insignificant, right? Like it's a big deal when it does happen. Well, it should be a big deal when it does happen. It's not something that's just kind of thrown around. Like, you know, people have allegiance to their nations, and they tell you, okay, well, Korea is doing this. Go fight these Koreans that you've never known your entire life. Like, why would you have issues with these people? Do you know what I mean? Like, he does bring up it. I know that seems like, oh, that's like, oh, you're just looking at it narrowly, but not really. Like, has allegiance to this mob, and sometimes it's they want you like people got to get whacked, like people got to get killed for different reasons. The government tells people like, you know, people have to be killed for other reasons. I mean, look what's going on in the world right now. You know, not gonna bring up modern example, but I'm sure people know what I'm talking about.
Steve here with a quick word from our sponsors. And you can also see that the point that he's making is, going halfway, to the other side of the planet and killing somebody in a country you have no idea, and they're just a soldier in a uniform, but he's killing, it could be his best friend, and you do it because that's what you're told to do, or it could be somebody you've grown up with and you've known for 40 years. But if they say that it's time for them to get whacked, you do it.
And then like usually there's good reasons for it. Either somebody turned an informant, or they're going to turn witness, or at least
They've
initially
stolen money.
They've stolen money from the family. They've done, there could be a lot of different, like, well rationalized like reasons for why they're doing this. And it basically comes down like, where should your loyalty lie? Like, should it lie locally? Right. Because that's another thing with a lot of these mob guys. They don't ever leave very far from where they're born. It's actually pretty incredible. Like, they might go like different states and stuff like that. But for the most part Lefty grew up in the same neighborhood as Mira. That was basically the neighborhood he knew. That's all he ever really knew. Is your loyalty locally and small in scope, or is it far away and it's global in scope? I mean, if you contrast Lefty, he said, my loyalty is locally. This is where my identity is. Joe Pistone identified with the FBI, in a more global way. It's this constant tug and pull that goes on in human history. What's more important, like the more national, the more global identity, or is it the more local one?
So let's talk a little bit about Lefty and how do Lefty and Donnie work together, and what are some of the things that move the investigation that Joe Pistone / Donnie Brasco is trying to do with Lefty?
Yeah, so Mira introduced like Lefty to Joe Pistone, and then, as we had just previously talked about, Mira went to jail, and basically Lefty took over Joe Pistone and, used him for his expertise and jewels, but, used him for, to collect debts and various other smaller end crimes. And they struck up quite a friendship, and like we pointed out, like Lefty was kind of like the historian of the mob. So he's explaining to Joe how the mob worked and, the rules of the mafia. And there's actually a lot of tapes of Lefty talking to Joe about how these rules work. And it's quite entertaining just seeing like how complex it is. One thing you'll notice too is like Lefty likes to talk. So he'll just like constantly repeating himself, but he's like, because he likes talking. And like Joe was like, oh, this is a blessing, because Lefty was totally different than Mira. Like Lefty wasn't abusive to like other people around him, and he wouldn't be like screaming at a waitress at a restaurant and threatening to pull out knives on people. I mean, Lefty was a ruthless guy. He claims to have had 26 hits under his belt, but like those are other mob guys, right? He didn't let that type of stuff go on, pour out into the regular public.
What did Lefty have to do with the three Capos murder? And maybe let's just pause for a minute, because this happens. Did it happen during the investigation? The three Capos murder? It was almost right in the middle
during
of
the
it.
Investigation. Yeah.
And we've started to see this three Capos murders from many, many different perspectives, because it just keeps coming back, and it's always weaving back into the story. So maybe you can quickly just review what the three Capos murders is or was, and then what did our crew have to do with it?
Okay, so yeah, the three Capos murders. Basically, Carmine Galante, he was the boss of the Bonanno family, but Philip Rusty Restali was the boss too, but he was in jail. So like Carmine Galante was like the acting boss. He gets killed. And we're going to do an episode on Carmine Galante down the road where we get into a lot more detail. But
and to just pause for a second to weave it back in, supposedly the Iceman, Richard Kuklinski, claimed to have been the one who whacked Carmine Galante.
It's possible. I mean, I'd have to look into it a little bit more, but that's one of Richard's stories. I go, I don't know. Is he telling the truth or not telling the truth on that one?
But I mean, just to even think about how these stories are all winding together. I personally, I mean, the whole Iceman thing is a whole different story, but so we'll focus in on just this aspect of it. But I think it bears repeating that we tried to focus this and bring up these issues because some of these same stories just keep weaving in and out of all the different characters we're talking about in this whole podcast.
Yeah, but Carmine Galante just was not well. He wasn't well liked by the commission. He wasn't well liked by his own family. He was like he was insanely greedy. I read somewhere he was making like millions of dollars every couple of months or something like back then, right? Which is just insane. Yeah, he was famous he was like the big drug trafficker. He was also famous for being one of the big proponents of bringing in the Zips, which was the Sicilians straight from Sicily to help with trafficking the drugs because they had more experience with it. And then it was easier for them. Oh yeah, so he just wasn't well liked. Even the commission didn't like him, and they signed off on this hit that went down. So Carmine Galante gets hit, and you can look up. It's a pretty brutal photo, but you can actually see a photo of the hit going down, and he's got like a cigar in his mouth still, and he's at the restaurant. Rumor has it that the FBI or the cops put the cigar in his mouth, and then then the pictures were taken. But I kind of like the idea of him getting shot and he's just chomping on the cigar, and it just sits in there because like he was famous for just having a cigar in his mouth at all times. Yeah, so he was killed, and Philip Rastelli was declared the head of the Bonanno family, but he was in jail, right? He was incarcerated. So he was like the head of the family and in jail. So this leads kind of like to a split in the Bonanno family where are the characters that we're talking about, Donnie, Lefty, and then eventually we're going to talk about Sonny Black. They were loyal to, and Joe Messino, who we talked about in the Rizzuto episodes, they were loyal to Philip Rastelli. And then there was these three capos led by Sonny Red that were part of the Sicilian faction. And they were attempting to overthrow Philip Rastelli. And they basically came to the conclusion, this is the brainchild of Joe Messino, but Sonny Black had a big part to do with this too, that they would lure them to this restaurant. And this is where the hit happened. Sonny Black was involved in the hit. Vito Rizzuto was involved in the hit. George Sasha, Joe Messino. Lefty's involvement, he was the lookout guy, and he was responsible for disposing of the bodies.
Since you bring up Sonny Black, let's talk a little bit about Sonny Black.
Yeah, Sonny Black, he wasn't Sicilian. He was a Neapolitan. Is that how you call it?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was Neapolitan, but he was born in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. So he's same general area where a lot of these guys come from, just not the exact same neighborhood as like Mira and as Lefty, right? And he was and he just like he grew up around the mob. Actually, he was good friends with Joe Messino. He was good friends with Rastelli, like right from the get-go. So yeah, he started off just like working in Mike Sabella's crew, I don't know, I guess he was like the underling under Mike. But once Carmine Galante was killed, Mike was taken out because he was loyal to Carmine Galante. He was demoted, and Sonny Black ended up becoming the capo of this crew. Now, the crew that we're talking about with Lefty and Donnie and himself and a couple of others, they were actually one of the more successful crews at the time in the New York area. And then what we learned from Joe when he talks about, says like Sonny Black was probably his favorite mobster to be around, and so he was just like kind of like a regular dude, and liked to have a good time, and he wasn't like a mobster 24/7. Like, he knew how to relax, and he liked to play practical jokes. I'll never understand why they never put this in the movie after learning about it, but apparently Donnie and him used to have arm wrestling matches all the time, and Donnie would beat him. He just comes across like a relatively normal guy that just happened to be like a mobster.
And the way that Joe Pistone talks about it, they really seem to legitimately become buddies.
Yeah, like really good friends. That was like, just to kind of bring it back to like Lefty a little bit. Like, Joe was, Joe would go over to Lefty's house all the time and have dinner, and like knew his kids, and knew his kids, and Lefty's son was suffered from drug addiction, and Joe would help Lefty's son with his drug addiction, and with Sonny, like they would crash at the same pad and eat dinners together, and he knew his wife and his girlfriends, and it generally sounds like Joe was friends with these guys, but he was able to keep it's weird how he kind of describes it. Like, the way he looked at it was like, I just wanted people to go to jail. Like, I didn't want anybody to get killed, but he obviously knew that was a possibility. And you listen to Joe talk about Sonny, and you would think, generally comes across, he's upset about what happened to Sonny. He wanted Sonny to turn witness, or at least just go to jail. And that's not what happened.
Yeah. One of the things with, that it's always so confusing is that how many rifts that this family, the Bonanno families, had in it, and how complicated it was with you had the three Capos murder, which it all kind of came together, but you had almost three different branches of the family. You had the regular ones, then you had the Zips, who were the Sicilians, and then you have the sixth family, and the Zips kind of interweaved with all of them. It's a really complicated family.
Which is weird, because like when Joe Bonanno was in charge, before he went kind of rogue, and we're not going to get into that because we're going to end up doing episodes on Joe Bonanno because it's a pretty fascinating story. When he went rogue and then was kicked out of the commission and was basically forced to go to retirement in Arizona, the whole family was just it was just chaos from that point on, and nobody was able to actually lead it properly. And it had the reputation, and rightfully so, as the most chaotic family out of all the five families in New York. And I think this is the reason why Joe was able to infiltrate as deep as he did, because it was chaotic. There was really no one in charge. That's the impression I get, is everyone was kind of doing their own thing. Like, the boss was in jail. Do you know what I mean? Like, how hands-on could he really be in terms of running the organization? So I think with the Bonannos, Joe had an opportunity to get in deep because of this kind of chaos, but I don't think he would have been able to do it with somebody with a more well-structured, well-ran family, say like the Genovese or the Gambinos.
I think that in a way too, this seemed like the perfect time, and it's probably nothing that Donnie could have ever planned, but it was probably the perfect time to kind of squeeze your way in. That so many of these people, I think in a lot of ways that Sonny Black was just looking for somebody to be able to rely on, and somebody who he could trust. And at least initially, Joe Pistone and Donnie Brasco was completely outside of the organization. It was kind of somebody who he could bring in and have as a direct ally. How do you really know if you can trust Anthony Mira, or how much can you really trust the Lefty when the rubber hit the road? But this person that this mafia guy, he could mold and create this unknown quantity in Donnie Brasco. That's worth something to him.
Oh yeah, for sure. And like you pointed out, I think he was just desperate to find to find someone. I think generally the entire Bonanno family was just it was desperate to find people that would work for them, right? I mean, if like Joe was undercover for 6 years, which is obviously a very long time to be undercover. But in terms of mob guys, I mean, within 6 years, like 6 years, and he was going to be getting made. Read some of these stories, and some of these guys had to wait like 30, 40 years to get made in some of these families. And Joe was, he was on his way to get made within 6.
Yeah, I mean, do you think it's not that much earlier in the early 70s? This one always comes up to me, is that Joe Gallo didn't get made until almost before he died, because they just weren't making new guys. They weren't bringing new people into the organization. Steve here again with a quick word from our sponsors.
Well, eventually we'll talk about this. Like when the whole commission was set up, they put like limits on the amount of guys you can actually get made. And like the reason for this was, to keep the balance of power between all the 5 families. And I just think the Bonanno family was so decimated from all the internal chaos as they had a lot of spots open. So
let's start wrapping up Donnie Brasco and what he did, how he finally basically broke the case and was able to extract himself out of this deep cover.
So 3 Capos murders happen. One of the Bruno Delcate didn't attend the meeting. He was the son of Sonny Red. He was supposed to get, because he was like, right there with his dad, right? He was supposed to get killed. He didn't get killed. And Sonny Black gave the contract to Donnie to do the murder. Obviously, Donnie didn't do the murder, but Sonny liked Donnie so much that he was gonna lie to the commission, saying like, "Oh yeah, this guy, he made his bones. Don't worry, he did like another hit," and he was on his way to get made. And there was like 2 competing arguments about what within the FBI, what should happen. Donnie, Joe Pistone wanted to like, "Hey, I've been doing this for 6 years. I might as well just take it all away. Like, let me become a made guy, and we'll see what happens." Whereas the FBI looked at the situation and there's like, it's way too dangerous, right? There's this internal civil war that's going on in the Bonanno family. You could get killed, and you know what? We're just going to pull the plug on this, and we're pulling you out. I don't know how I would be furious if I was Joe. I'm like, I put 6 years in this, and like, I'm right there, and you're not going to let me get made. Like, that's crazy.
I can kind of see where they're going with that, though, because I don't think he was going to really get made unless he really did a contract. I think he to actually get made, either he actually never did keep his hands clean, or he was a master at pulling the wool over these guys' eyes. But I think there's just no way for 6 years he's about to get made, he completely kept his hands clean from the rougher stuff, not just, like we'll talk a little bit about the King's Court Club and some of the things they were doing in Florida. He was going to have to do something big to actually get made. He was going to have to kill somebody.
I just said, like, according to Joe, like it was going to happen in like December or something. It was like a couple of months, and Sonny was going to lie about it. I don't know if that's true or not. Joe could be telling a fib, right? Or twisting the truth a little bit there. But I mean, if that is accurate, I think I'd be pretty pissed, man. I'll be like, I put 6 years in this. I risked my life. I did all of this, and I'm right there to, the golden chalice. And you guys are telling me, no, you can't do it. Like it would be, I mean, it didn't in the end, he got, I think it was like over 100 convictions, and like his testimony was used at like the Pizza Connection trial, which is, we'll save that for another episode, because that was a massive trial involving like the Zips and the Sicilians and drug trafficking. He testified up here in Canada too with the Rizzuto family.
also, I have to imagine that somebody who is that intimately involved to the point that they were going to get made might start breaking down his credibility in court.
For sure. The FBI, they did bring that up, being like, well, this guy got made. Like, what did he do? Type thing, right? Where like if he stayed from not being made, his credibility would still it would be better.
That all of these things that they got involved with in Florida, didn't you? To me, they all kind of had the sense of 2-bit crimes. That it was all a low end. It's almost like they just wanted a criminal vacation from everything that was going on in New York. And then maybe with the side benefit of making a name with the big mafia boss of Florida, who's another one we really have to talk about, Santo Trafficante.
Yeah. So yeah, Florida. Yeah, you mentioned him. Like Florida was ran by Santo Trafficante for, I don't know,
ever, basically.
Forever, right? He basically ran Florida. But there was like kind of a feeling that like Florida was being underutilized within the mob circles. So the Bonannos went down there and they were attempting to, start gambling and kind of turn Florida into like a different kind of Vegas. It is actually pretty remarkable that Florida was never. I guess maybe they're just way tougher on law, like tougher down there in terms of like cracking down on lawlessness. Maybe that's the reason. I have to look into it, but it is, thinking about it is quite remarkable that Florida was never kind of turned into like a little Vegas.
I think in a lot of ways, I mean, we're probably stepping way outside of what we're talking about, but I think part of the reason why it was so underdeveloped, mafia wise, at least by the 1980s, is that for one, Santo Trafficante and his father, they basically had the stranglehold on Florida entirely since I think around the early 1900s, before the Mustache Pete's and all of that, that I think in a way that they controlled it so tightly, it just wasn't as dynamic of an environment as in New York, where you really had to work hard to earn up there and find new scams, where I think that Trafficante and they were very comfortable in their scams down there and they just didn't have to work it as much. But again, we'll get into that's a whole, because then we start getting into JFK and the CIA in Havana. So we don't want to go too far down that road. But to wrap up our story today with Joe Pistone, how does this and Operation Donnie Brasco, how does this wrap up?
Well, they end up going to Florida and they set up the King's Court, which is basically just an FBI front, or they put a lot of work into it. Actually, they even got like a lion, like a live lion, to stay like in front of the restaurant. Like they show that in the movie, but that actually did happen. Like Lefty actually did get a lion. It wasn't full grown; it was a cub at the time, and then they, being the dummies that they are, they didn't realize, like, oh yeah, it's a lion; it's gonna grow up. Yeah, and it was basically they just wiretapped this bar, and this was a joint effort with another undercover agent that was working in Florida, Tony Rossi, and they basically got them on tape, committing like illegal gambling and drug trafficking and extortion and all the various crimes that they were committing.
Tony Rossi's kind of an unsung hero of all of this. He was FBI agent Edgar Robb, and he played a very similar role to Donnie Brasco. And he was, in a mafia associate, but he was actually from Virginia. And afterwards, he didn't really embrace the whole Joe Pistone in a lot of ways became Donnie Brasco after after everything was done. And he really embraced this, where this, Tony Rossi, whose real name was Edgar Robb, he went and he became after his FBI career, he became a Virginia state senator, and then he became the sheriff of the county surrounding Charlottesville, Virginia, and he was a really successful sheriff. after that. So he didn't really embrace that whole lifestyle the way that Donnie Brasco did.
Yeah, in the movie, he gets kind of depicted as a little bit of a doofus, but in reality, he was no slouch. He was a very serious undercover cop, and he was very successful too.
And so you allude to it that after the fact, so many people went down after this, and I mean, Donnie Brasco really sent the Bonanno family into utter chaos, which that chaos reverberates through our episodes on Vito Rizzuto, and it's going to reverberate across the entire podcast.
Well, actually, the FBI informed Sonny Black and the other mafia leaders, but at first, Sonny and Lefty and that crew, Donnie's actually, his name's Joe Pistone. He's an FBI agent. He's been undercover this entire time. At first, they didn't believe it. They're like, Donnie, what are you talking about? Like, we did this and this and then. Donnie's not an FBI agent. They thought they were lying at first. Even after they showed them pictures, they were like, oh no, Donnie's not an FBI agent. That unfortunately in their case turned out to not be true. He was an FBI agent, and Sonny was immediately whacked. He had to pay the price for letting Donnie get into the family. Lefty probably would have got whacked too, but he got arrested, so his life was spared. It's surprising that Lefty didn't get whacked in jail, but it never happened.
Yeah, that's kind of the amazing part of the story, that Lefty lived to die a natural death.
Yeah, he died. He had terminal cancer later in his life. According to Joe, though, like, he ended up getting out of prison, and even with terminal cancer, apparently that was the only thing he was worried about, was getting back at Joe. Like, in the movie, it seems like it's weird because they kind of switched it up a little bit, where, from my understanding, Sonny wasn't super angry that Joe ended up turning out to be an FBI agent. He's like, he didn't force us to do anything that we weren't going to do ourselves, and he still, to the end, according to his I believe it was his wife, said, like, he was happy that if someone was going to take him down, he was happy with somebody like Donnie. It's interesting to think, because there's a certain respect. There's a lot of respect about that, really. Like, Sonny could have turned witness, and I'm pretty sure that's what Joe wanted, was for Sonny to turn state witness, and he didn't do it. He lived the life, and he was going to pay the price for his mistake.
So many different threads shoot out of these stories too. Like, just when we were looking things up, that Bruno Indelicato, Sonny Red's son, was married to Kathy Burke, who was Jimmy the Gent Burke's daughter, who was probably the one who got all of the Lufthansa money, which kind of in a way I always wondered, and we talked about that, where did the Lufthansa money go after Jimmy the Burke whacked everybody and took all the money, and then he died in prison? Well, Bruno Indelicato, I bet you, knows where that money is.
Yeah, that's always what I thought of. His daughter knows where it is. I don't know, maybe it's hidden in a shoebox in her house somewhere. I don't know. It's probably a little bit more, it's probably in a safe place, and like her and maybe like one other person might know where it is.
Looking back at it, I think in a lot of ways, I have a hard time wrapping my mind around the type of person like Donnie Brasco, Joe Pistone as a human being who can go so deep into undercover and assume this identity, befriend all of these people. And I mean, just spend hours upon hours being friends with these people. I don't know what kind of person could do that. And I know I couldn't do it myself, that I don't think that I could ever be able to mentally draw this line that I'm playing a role and I'll just be friends with these people. I'll be friends with their spouses. I'll go on vacation with them. I'll horse around with them. And in a lot of ways, I don't respect him for it.
I don't think I could do it. I mean, I think it takes a very particular type of personality to do what Joe did and to do it as successful as Joe did, right? Because that's his operation was a massive success, right? It was really the first time that the government agency was able to infiltrate like the inner walls of the mafia in New York. I know it's weird because like we were talking about it earlier. Like Joe talks about Sonny, like they were friends, and the way Joe describes it, and I guess this would be the approach I would have to take too. It's like, well, that's those guys' rules, right? Like these people are committing crimes, and I wanted them to go to jail, right? But them whacking each other and stuff like that, like that's their rules. Those aren't my rules. I'm doing a job, and like my job was to infiltrate this family and stop some of the stuff that they were doing. It's weird. He doesn't really judge them either, right? This is the life that they chose to live, and this is the life that I chose to live, and we're just on opposite ends, really.
But the legitimate cop, the detective who's, investigating these crimes, that person stays within the bounds of law enforcement. They're not going in and going to these kids' birthday parties. And I just think as a human being, to be able to do that and to be able to justify it and that, well, I'm fighting crime. We look at the fallout of this. As many people as Lefty went to jail for a little bit. There was some major busts, but I mean, really, in the time after this, the sixth family, Vito Rizzuto's family, just takes off like a rocket. A million other things happen in the 80s with the mafia. I just wonder, as a human being, for Joe Pistone, what kind of human being do you have to be to separate those two things, those two ideas in your mind? I have a very hard time wrapping my mind around it. And I would honestly love to hear how other people out there think about it. It's kind of like going back to your metaphor of the soldier being sent overseas to go kill someone, that you're doing it inside of your role as the military. You're wearing your military uniform, they're wearing their uniform, and you go and kill them. It's a very different story where if you put on their uniform and you go live in the trenches with them and you become best friends with them, and then you're killing them behind the lines. I just have a very hard time wrapping my mind around that. Over this whole kind of nebulous idea of nationalism, or you're fighting for this bigger ideal that really doesn't pan out in the end to much of anything.
That's the thing. Like, if you're just reading Joe's story, like, and I've never talked to Joe. I don't know Joe personally. I don't know. Maybe we can try to get Joe on the show. I don't know, because he does do like podcasts I've listened to him. But just reading a story, I would walk away and be like, Joe is definitely somebody I would never trust with literally anything. Because if he could do this, then he can lie about anything, really. I mean, he convinced the hardened mobsters that he was a wise guy for 6 years. I mean, Lefty, when he was in court, he was saying his bit. Like, he's like, dude, like, Joe's not a cop, man. He's a mob guy. He's lying to you. He's always been a mob guy. That's how convinced Lefty was that, like, even he accepted the fact that Joe was an FBI agent. He wasn't really an FBI agent. He had become a mob guy.
Also, I think in a way that I kind of don't. It makes me feel a little squeamish the way Joe Pistone's capitalized on Donnie Brasco. Like you said, he'll basically go anywhere and talk for money about it. He wrote these really cringy novels with Donnie Brasco as the main character of it. I don't know. In a lot of ways, I respect what Tony Rossi did. Tony Rossi, to me, or Edgar Robb, approached it as a cop, and he did his bit Undercover. And then he went and did more cop stuff afterwards. I guess maybe Donnie really did live with 2 feet. Like, how could you do something for 6 years? At some point, he was really enjoying himself. I don't think otherwise. You couldn't do something you hate for 6 years and invest that much of yourself in it. I think he probably liked it.
Yeah, I think there's a part of him that even to this day, he's a wise guy. I really do. I think there's a part of him that's totally that. I also think Joe, I think he likes the attention too, right? And I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with that. Like he got involved in film and he's hung out with actors and he seems to enjoy like some parts of Hollywood. And I think he likes the attention. And yeah, I mean, this is what he's famous for. And you know, we got a great movie out of it, Donnie Brasco, but there was like a couple of TV shows that he was involved in and stuff. I just think he likes the attention to a degree. And I don't know, is that a bad thing? Is that a good thing? I don't know. I don't know if I would like that type of attention, but some people do.
Well, speaking of Donnie Brasco, the movie, next time tune in as we really dive into some of the things that were true about Donnie Brasco, some of the things that they kind of massage the details of. Overall, I'm really looking forward to talking about the movie Donnie Brasco because I would say it's one of my top 5 movies. I love that movie.
Yeah, Donnie Brasco is it's great. One of the best mob movies ever. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoy Johnny Depp's role as Joe Pistone. And yeah, I don't know, Joe, if you end up listening to this podcast, you know, come on and explain to us how you could be friends with these guys for so long on that. Because I've heard you talk about it, but I would like to hear it like talking to you just one-on-one. But, you know, that's probably a long shot.
All right. And with that, we'll catch you next time.